Hi, welcome. Welcome how to teach about cannabis and vaping by teaching students to think for themselves. My name is Sasha Simon, and I am the Safety First Senior Program Manager at the Drug Policy Alliance. And how about we get started about me giving you a little background on Safety First. Safety First, Real Drug Education for Teens is the nation's first harm reduction-based drug education curriculum for high school students. So it's intended to be taught in high schools by high school health teachers in high school health classrooms. So it's really important to note that the curriculum is based in harm reduction, and that is pretty much the antithesis to abstinence-based only curricula, which have really been pervasive throughout our education system. And abstinence-based curricula assume that all people at all times will abstain from drugs forever and ever, right? And we can see by our overdose rates and also the large number of people who've been incarcerated in the US due to drug offenses that people simply do not abstain from drugs. It's simply an unattainable goal, and it's not a realistic goal. So harm reduction-based education is a lot more, if you want to think about it, like comprehensive sex ed, right? Ideally, we want teens to wait if they're going to have sex, right? But if they're going to have sex, and we know that some teens are going to do it, we want them to have accurate information and skills so they can keep themselves and others safe. That's the same philosophy of harm reduction-based drug education. Ideally, we want kids to abstain. Ideally, we want them to protect their bodies. We want them to protect their developing brains. But we do know that some teens are ultimately going to use drugs, if not in their teenage years, at some point in their life. So the idea is to really normalize, to some extent, drug use and also drug safety. And drug use, the idea of normalizing drug use often scares people, but it's in the mass criminalization, in the punishment and the silencing of discourses around how to be safe that are really driving the overdose rate and really causing a schism within a lot of people, within students to understand family members who may be using drugs or for medicinal purposes or for therapeutic or recreational purposes. And it makes them question if their teachers are telling them the truth. So Safety First offers an opportunity for teachers to really be able to teach students about drugs, all the different drug classes, as well as health and policy, in a way that's quite similar to comprehensive sex ed. So we've actually evaluated Safety First twice, once in spring 2018 in New York, and then again in spring 2019 in San Francisco. We surveyed over 600 students, and we had some great results, including some statistically significant results. And some of those include the fact that students were more likely to answer after they have taken Safety First that edible cannabis takes longer to take effect than smoked cannabis. A lot of people find that out the hard way, especially teens, but after Safety First, they learned that there's a difference in those routes of administration and routes of consumption. They also learn how to be able to recognize the signs of an overdose. And another skill that they were able to pick up on after using Safety First, and that's really the crux of this presentation, after students took Safety First, they were more likely to answer that evaluating or looking at just one online resource is not nearly enough to understand the effects of a drug. So they understood that there needs to be a research component when when you're looking for drug information and when you need to know anything about drugs. And if you're interested, Safety First is available for free online at the Drug Policy Alliance's website. You can go to drugpolicyalliance.org/safetyfirst at any time and download it for free, and I highly encourage that you do. So in developing Safety First, we had a bit of a dilemma. When we wanted to decide to teach about cannabis, we had to think about a few things, right? And that's the fact that the landscape of cannabis and vaping is ever changing. Whether it be information that's out there in the media or be it state or city policies, that govern the use of either cannabis or vaping products. So depending on where you are, policies might be different, and people's agendas in terms of the information that they put out there might be different as well. And so as a policy organization, we recognize that. But what's really special about Safety First is it's one of the one things that's apolitical from DPA, meaning that we take no stance on anything about drugs, and we really encourage students to think for themselves. So we had to think, how are we going to teach kids about cannabis, knowing that, well, we do have some certain beliefs around cannabis use and cannabis legalization. However, we don't want students just to believe, what we do just because of a name. And we want them to have the skills to be able to decide these things for themselves, and to really feel grounded in their own beliefs and their own decisions. So we had to think about how we make this lesson effective and usable across diverse student populations and geographies. Again, in some places, cannabis is legal, in other places it isn't. So it'll be a different kind of conversation. And in some places, vaping is legal, in other places, the sale and distribution of cannabis products is perfectly legal. So these things are different from place to place. And then the biggest thing is that there is a lot of misinformation, a lot of inaccurate and especially biased information about drugs online, but that's where kids get the majority of their information. In fact, when we conducted our pilots, we asked students, where do you learn about drugs? Where do you get information about drugs? And they told us straight up, they get it online. So we can't fight that. And we can't fight everyone who puts everything out on the internet, but what we can do is equip young people to be able to decipher what's good information, what's bad information, and how can I make healthy decisions for myself based on that. So our solution was the CRAAP test. We actually turned that dilemma over to some teachers. I got to sit down with some English teachers as well as some science teachers, and they taught me about the CRAAP test. Many of you have probably already heard of this or used this with your students, but the CRAAP test is a great tool, and it's a great and easy to use acronym for how to evaluate the credibility of sources. So let's break it down real quick. The C in CRAAP stands for currency. Is it the most recent information, right? Is it based on recent studies and recent facts? What's the relevance? That's the R. What's the relevance? Is this the information that you need to actually complete your assignment? So while you're looking for this information, is it actually relevant to what it is that you're trying to figure out? The first A in the CRAAP test it stands for authority. So who is the author of this information? What are their credentials, and why should you listen to them about this subject? The second A is accuracy. Is the information supported by evidence? Right? So we encourage students to look at, well, where is this author getting their information from? Is it from a scientific study, or is it maybe from some pop culture article that they read and they just happen to cite it? Can you verify what this author is saying in another source, and is it error-free? And then lastly, the P stands for purpose. Does the author of the website have a goal or agenda, and does it rest on evidence, or does it rest on opinion? So we use the CRAAP test to help students learn about cannabis and learn about vaping, and this is what the rubric looks like. You can find many different rubrics for the CRAAP test online, but this is the one that we zhuzhed up a little bit from Safety First. And these are the Safety First theme colors here, this light blue. But it's ranked on, let me move my face out the way. It's ranked on a scale from 0 to 3. And 0 means that, it's not rated all that highly. And then 3 means that it meets very high standards of criteria. So students are able to actually score what it is that they see and what it is that they are perceiving about each resource as they take a look at it. So let's learn a little bit more about the Safety First, how we use Safety First, or how we use the CRAAP test with Safety First. So the Safety First method, this is how we do it. we provide students with a list of statements about cannabis and vaping. In this instance, we'll talk about cannabis. Many things that are often controversial and people don't really know if they're fact or if they're fiction. So we ask teachers to post those all over the room, or to put those statements up and ask students to vote on if they think they're true or false. An example statement, and this comes directly out of the curriculum, is using cannabis makes you hungry, or using cannabis gives you the munchies, right? That's one example. So students vote on whether they think that statement is true or false. Then teachers introduce the CRAAP test to students and actually practice in some really fun and cool ways how to actually utilize the CRAAP test. And the example that we use in the curriculum, or one of many examples that we use to help teachers go through this process with their students, is we use, for example, a Reddit comments thread. Many people go to these comment threads on Reddit and, you know, take completely anonymous people who they don't know as experts. And so in this example, we have a Reddit user, I think his name is like Cheeto Aficionado or something like this, like that. And he says these really profound things about cannabis, but we also have students really think about, well, who is he? Who's Cheeto Aficionado? And what are his credentials, and why should we believe him? Just because his words are pretty, right? So we don't really know. So it's important to actually practice using the CRAAP test with students. Then break students into group and ask them to research one of the statements. So have each group research one of those statements, and then ask them to find 2 sources that agree with the statement, and then 2 sources that oppose it, right? Because there is valid information on all sides, right? And it's important that, you know, students be able to grapple with that reality. So the safety first method continued. After each group does all of their research, ask them to decide if they think that statement about cannabis is true or false based on their research, right? Then, after they decide what they think about that statement, they should share what they found in their research with the group. We thought this statement was true or false because of the evidence that we found in these sources here. And we thought these were good sources because they rated highly on the CRAAP test on these measures, right? So they share out with the class, each group shares out, and then after each group shares out with the class, ask students to re-vote on each statement. And what's very interesting about that is you can see how students actually shift their thinking based on the research that they do, or based on the research that other people do, and their ability to really put forth a very strong argument based on evidence, based on credible sources that back up why they have that belief about the statement. So it's great for students to be able to see the strength of really being able to do great research and sharing that out. So here are some benefits of using the CRAAP test in the classroom. So for students, and this is number one for me, is they are able to build critical health and media literacy skills. And that is so important. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has made it so clear why it is so important to ingrain this skill early, because after you finish school, you're responsible for all your health choices, how you consume health information, and the decisions that you make based on the information that you know. So knowing how to be able to look at information that comes out in the media and be able to suss out what's accurate, what may not be what may be inaccurate, and decide what's best for you is so important. It also sets a really high standard, and in my opinion, a higher standard than what most people are used to for debate and critical thinking. If you're used to considering there's a rubric and a standard by which I can measure the credibility of a source, it makes it easier to be able to measure other people's arguments and the sources that they use to back them up on that same vetted and reliable metric, which is the CRAAP test. So it really sets a nice, clear standard, and a standard that is so necessary right now. And then again, the ability to be able to evaluate sources is a Common Core tested skill. So to be able to evaluate a source and to be able to make a statement based on evidence is a Common Core tested skill. So why not have students practice this skill on a subject that's probably pretty interesting for them? So some benefits for teachers in schools is that the CRAAP test really embraces the fact that there is new and evolving realities and new and evolving information surrounding drug use and safety. I spoke earlier about the fact that drugs are legalized, typically on a state-by-state basis in the US. And so things often change, information often change as politics get involved. The agenda of certain information can change and evolve, and it puts a lot of pressure on teachers to really stay up on all of this. But it shouldn't be on them. And relying on the CRAAP test makes it a lot easier, and takes a lot less pressure off the teacher to be a drug expert when, again, a lot of teachers haven't really been engaged in a harm reduction based approach to drug use and drug education. So it's a new lane, it's a new territory for them, and it takes a lot of that pressure off. The CRAAP test is also relevant and timely across subjects and disciplines. Again, it was an English teacher who taught me about this. She thought it would be a great way to help students practice, really functional and practical English language arts skills, while also learning practical health skills and practical information about cannabis and vaping. So it's very easy to use across disciplines, and you can, it's very easy to collaborate on projects with as well. And then also teachers are already familiar with the CRAAP test. So it's a great way to have students engage with information online with a tool that many teachers are already familiar with. So I highly, highly encourage you to go download the Google Classroom compatible version of Safety First that we released in June 2020. The original version is intended for in-person use, but we just made an update so that it's completely Google Classroom compatible. So if you want to check it out, by all means, go to drugpolicy.org/safetyfirst. And I always look forward to questions and comments and feedback. So please feel free to get in touch. And I look forward to hearing from you. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be back at YTH presenting on this topic. My name is Caroline D. Davis, and I am the CEO and founder of Compassion, also affectionately known as Miss Caroline. And joining me is Javon Hines, who's a student that actually created the video that we're going to present today, and we're so excited. So our presentation is titled What the Video Is, The Truth About Tobacco in the Bronx. So our presentation goals, we're going to focus on some statistics and information in regards to tobacco. We're going to show you the actual video that Javon is the creative mind behind. And we're going to address answering 3 specific questions. 1, how does our video inspire others to use social media and video to empower young people? 2, how does our video support young people and their allies to make well-informed decisions? And lastly, how does our video spread awareness about issues in our community? So all this talk about our video, here's the truth about tobacco in the Bronx.
Almost 1 million people in New York City smoke cigarettes. And out of that 1 million, 150,000 smoke in the Bronx. I'm Javon Hines from the Bronx, born and raised here. Home of Yankee Stadium, home of hip hop, but it's also the home of the highest asthma rates in New York City. Almost 400,000 people die each year from this easily avoided deadly habit, smoking. That's more than car accidents, murders, suicides, and even HIV. And you never hear about this on the news. For decades, big tobacco companies have targeted minority communities such as mine, more specifically African Americans. They target us with things like nicotine and menthol. Nicotine binds tightly with the melanin in our skin. 90% of African Americans smoke menthol cigarettes. Menthol makes it easier to smoke and harder to quit. It suppresses the worst effects of smoking. The ones who smoke are not only affecting themselves, but the others around them. Secondhand smoke contributes to 41,000 deaths every year. Secondhand smoke contains more than 7,000 chemicals that are toxic in a mixture of gases. And thirdhand smoke is the leftover residue of the cigarette, and it just stinks. There is no escape from these health hazards in New York City. It's everywhere, from public transportation to homes, to the sidewalks. Walking in a hospital, you would assume it would be a smoke-free environment, but walking to work, it is all alongside the hospital. And the people that advertise health are the ones outside smoking. Big tobacco companies need to continue their business for as long as possible, so they label the young people as replacement smokers. They try to recruit teenagers like me to replace the current smokers who are dying or trying to quit with fresh lungs so they can continue making their money. I've made this decision that I won't smoke in my life. With all the education that I've gathered and all the education that I've consumed about the effects of tobacco, I'm not a replacement smoker, I'm a finisher.
Is it me?
So a lot has happened within the span of 3 years when that video was made. Now I believe at the end of the video it said that I was starting college, and now I stand here today in 2020 as a college graduate. I'm even amongst the midst of everything that has been going on within 2020, as well as receiving a full-time offer as an information technology associate for a really good company in New York City. But to this day, the message of the video still stands, and the positive message of the video still stands. And one of the reasons why we wanted to make this video was to shed light on the individual concerns regarding Bronx health and regarding the big tobacco companies that target our community. And as well as to have this video to share it with the youth regarding tobacco, and lastly to empower our youth within our community to not become replacement smokers, but to become finishers. Now we have trendy ways for tobacco to reach our youth. We have the hookah, e-cigs, and then Juul. Hookah is a big thing in our community within the Bronx. We have hookah lounges where you can purchase a lounge and just utilize hookah for your time being there. We also have a lot of social settings on our streets and sessions where people utilize hookah. But initially, hookah was seen as harmless because of the water vapor. It turns out that hookah is almost, or if not, just as bad as cigarettes. Then we have e-cigs, which was initially there for adults who wanted to quit smoking and help them quit smoking. Unfortunately, it got in the hands of our young people. And Juul, which is a device that is attracted to these young people, that it almost looks sort of like a flash drive, and it comes in different packaging. Juul contains nicotine, which is harmful to our youth because they are still developing. And for our next slide, we have marijuana and cigarettes. Marijuana is a major issue in our country regarding legalization and keeping it illegal. We know that marijuana is utilized for medicinal use. Many people who use marijuana know the reason why they use it. It could possibly be because of a coping mechanism and just to relax and to have fun, simply. We know now that it's at its highest use level for teens and young adults. And unfortunately, marijuana can become addictive and it can affect your social life. Cigarettes, as we all may know, has deadly health effects, especially over time, short-term health effects and long-term health effects. And cigarettes are expensive. In New York City, cigarettes is around $14 a pack. And regarding coming back to the Bronx community, which is one of the lowest income communities, $14 can go a long way. Luckily, cigarettes is at its lowest use for teens. However, it's in disguise with many other tobacco products that we mentioned in the prior slide, such as hookah and Juul. And next we have importance of exposure, which is very important to me. And one of the reasons why I made this slide titled Importance of Exposure is because of the experiences that has helped me and that has shaped me to be here today. Become at a Bronx youth, coming out of the Bronx as a young person, talking about topics of tobacco and how bad it affects us is not very popular. But fortunately, we were able to receive media attention from NBC and be interviewed on the Today Show. And then after that, we had the opportunity to have a free trip. Me and other 3 Bronx youth had a free trip to Florida to join Truth Initiative on their national summit on youth activism and to meet numerous people, same age, numerous people from all over the country with different backgrounds, share similar experiences and similar messages on tobacco and the big tobacco companies. And after that, we received media attention from the Bronx, which later led us to be able to go to San Francisco in 2019 for YTH and present our topic and showcase my video, and still just drive that positive message and shed light on what's going on in the Bronx. And then now we're here today in 2020, virtual, which is really amazing, really amazing. Next, we have some of our New York City facts, which is New York City 1000, New York City Housing Authority. And me being a NYCHA resident has become smoke-free, and this is really important for me. Pharmacies who give us medicine and try and help us to live a healthy life have stopped selling tobacco products, which is good because it's counterproductive. The legal sale for tobacco products and e-cigarettes are 21 and up now. Prior to that was 18, which is a good thing because high school seniors were purchasing these tobacco products. But I believe this is still an issue today in our communities because tobacco resellers and our bodegas within our community, they are selling tobacco products without issuing or asking for an ID. And lastly, we have smoking is allowed on sidewalks, but not within 15 feet of any entrance, which is a really great thing. But I think next year, or this year at least, we need to push for smoking to be banned around bus stops and train stops, especially because during the school time, which many people within middle school and high school, young adults, wait for those buses and wait for those trains, and people are there smoking, and we are receiving the secondhand smoke, which is just as deadly as the person that is smoking the cigarette. I believe that is our presentation. I'm Javon Hines, and we have Ms. Caroline. And unfortunately, the man behind the camera of the video, Todd Elliott, he wasn't able to present today, but he is still here with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, and good afternoon, everyone. Even though we are providing this presentation on a virtual platform, we would like to pay respects to each tribal nation and acknowledge the tribal lands that we are all residing on. I'm Amber Sahota, Project Coordinator for California's Clean Air Project. CRAAP, a project of ETR. I would like to thank all participants joining this afternoon's Cannabis and Vaping Breakout panel. It's an honor to be presenting the YTH Virtual 2020 conference. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, CCAP's Community Outreach Specialist, Chantel Como, as we'll be discussing our Youth Advocacy Against Tobacco Toolkit. Before we jump right in, we would like to share a short video that will help paint a picture of the work we do within California tribal communities, and more specifically, with California tribal youth.
Yes, I actually have tried tobacco before. I was about 13 years old when I tried it. It was a Swisher. I've also tried cigarettes, vaping, and a Juul. Vaping wasn't as bad as cigarettes, but I still don't think it's that great. When I tried cigarettes, it got me pretty sick. I do not smoke anymore.
There's two ways of using tobacco, like as you said, the spiritual way, and then that way to abuse, like kind of use it more often. And there's actually two different things, because like to use it more often, you're just, just blowing, just using it. But if you use it sacredly and stuff, you're using it for a purpose.
What I was told is we use tobacco as an offering and a thanks.
Peer pressure is definitely a big thing in today's world. There's kids that have this new product called a Juul. It's just a really small device that vapes, and I think kids think it's really cool because it forms clouds of smoke and they just want to look cool like everybody else. Marketing is big too, because they try to make it seem like it's such a big thing and it's awesome for everyone to do, when really it's killing your body and you shouldn't do it.
Marketing and peer pressure has a great influence on children smoking and drawing children in to their products.
They spend a lot of money just to get people hooked. And like most people say, oh, it's just for the adults and all these flavors, oh yay for the adults. But really when the kids see it, they're like, oh yay, let's try this.
I just feel like there should be more policies, not even just in school, just in general, like at home, where you live, or you hang out with your friends.
I think there is a need for more education around smoking and vaping, because it's an epidemic and it's getting all these kids hooked and it's no good.
If I wanted to help my tribe get policies on not to smoke anymore, I'd probably have to get like a group of people to help me too.
Us as youth, we need to speak up, and we need to start talking about how it's not good for us. It's not good for our health. It's not good for the people who are smoking, and we need to just have a voice about it.
The video just shared was created by CCAAP while participating at last year's 2019 Strong Heart Walk, where the intention is to raise awareness about the health disparities facing Southern California's tribal communities. The Strong Heart Walk invites youth to see themselves as warriors, to accept leadership roles within their community regarding health disparity issues. Youth are called upon to express their warrior spirit in the form of poetry, spoken word, traditional or contemporary song or dance in their own language, or other expressions to be shared during the event. According to 2019 National Youth Tobacco Survey data, 16.1% of American Indian Alaska Native middle schoolers and 40.4% of American Indian Alaska Native high schoolers were current e-cigarette users. This is much higher than the general population rate of 27.5% among high schoolers and 10.5% among middle schoolers. In understanding the e-cigarette use epidemic among tribal youth, it is clear that the tobacco industry has strategically targeted this community by creating the next generation of smokers through marketing and advances in electronic nicotine delivery systems such as vapes and puff bars. Over the past 3 years, we have participated in local tribal events, conferences, and gatherings to learn more about how the tobacco industry has targeted tribal communities. We have learned that to have sustainability around youth tobacco use prevention, it was imperative that tribal youth be a part of the initiative. Tribal government officials, as key decision makers within their communities, recognize that investing in today's youth will preserve tradition and their rights as sovereign nations. Through further collaboration with tribal leaders and tribal community program directors, CRAAP created a 3-part toolkit entitled Youth Advocacy Against Tobacco. The first series, Traditional Sacred Tobacco, revolves around first identifying the participants' knowledge on traditional and/or sacred use versus non-traditional use, and what that looks like in their respective tribes. Through ongoing consultation with tribal leaders, our staff participated in the tribal cultural humility training to better understand and ensure that we address trauma-informed approaches to keeping it sacred. The second series revolves around commercial tobacco use, such as the emergence of electronic nicotine devices, effects of secondhand smoke, and the commercial tobacco use among tribal youth. A key aspect of this series is making the connection of tobacco use with health disparities that the Native community face. Now more than ever, we understand how COVID-19 has disproportionately ravaged communities of color. And unfortunately, our Native communities have not been immune to this. We want to not only make the connection with how tobacco use exacerbates existing health issues, but how tobacco use acts no differently. If anything, it adds more risk to the users with the current pandemic. The last series, entitled Strategizing the Change, is where we take information learned from the first 2 pieces and start putting that knowledge into action to create a tobacco education and prevention campaign. This series dives into what is called the Midwest Academy Strategies Chart, which we'll be diving into during the later slides. This chart helps organize advocacy efforts in identifying short-term and long-term goals, understanding best practices in community engagement, learning how to turn support into action, identifying allies for your cause, possible opposition, and identifying resources. This in turn becomes a living document to assist with the end goal of policy adoption or community action for change. I will now pass it on to my colleague, Chantel.
Thank you, Manveer. I'm going to discuss our project's growth mindset in the changing landscape. As mentioned, our goal was to work directly with the California Tribal Youth Council in person. We understood the importance of getting to go out and meet with the council to not only deliver a presentation around our toolkit, but knowing that this program would thrive through personal connection and really getting to meet and spend time with them. This was a huge emphasis for us at the time. The toolkit centered around providing the council with the tools to go out into their communities to advocate in person. As the country grappled with the initial shelter-in-place orders, we continued to gain knowledge around how COVID-19 affected the body and specifically the lungs. And more importantly, we understood that marginalized communities of color were being disproportionately affected, with Native communities having some of the highest numbers of positive cases. It was clear. Our work in tobacco prevention needed to include COVID-19 within the narrative of health disparities that coincide with the Native community. Our team returned to the drawing board to see how we could still transform an in-person presentation to one in which we could still amplify the voices of the youth in virtual spaces. This then transformed to moving the toolkit on an online platform called Survey Gizmo. The toolkit has turned into a virtual 3-part narrated series that is self-paced. Within the virtual toolkit, videos are included, as well as built-in polls and quizzes as check your knowledge points throughout to ensure engagement and understanding of topic areas. Each series also includes virtual activities such as using social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for social media scavenger hunts and looking for youth-targeted tobacco advertising, as well as creating an elevator pitch that can be shared virtually. We also recognize that in order to be equitable, we needed to acknowledge that there are tribes around California that may not have the accessibility to online platforms or social media platforms for some of the activities that we included within the 3 topic areas. This brought us to not only adapt advocacy strategies to the current landscape, but to think beyond the current social climate. The virtual toolkit has been adapted into a handbook that take the same topic areas and activities, but can be done in person once communities begin to return to pre-COVID in-person meetings. Collaboration is key. Collaboration in creating this toolkit has been the foundation for the entirety of this project. We have come to understand the importance of tribal leadership by gaining input on the topic areas and to ensure that it fits the needs of the youth that would be using this toolkit. We also learned to receive this valuable insight from tribal leadership, we needed to build trust within the system of government. By building upon this trust, we found that this was the window in promoting youth-led advocacy and leadership within the community. With mobilizing and providing advocacy tools for youth leaders, this leads to more community engagement and gaining more support and awareness around tobacco prevention within the tribes. A huge takeaway and positive result that happens organically through community engagement is cultural connectedness and healing, especially around tobacco use and the negative effects the tobacco industry has brought upon tribal nations. As mentioned, we wanted to touch on the Midwest Academy Strategies chart that is featured in the third part of the toolkit where we strategize the change. This tool provides a focal point for a group campaign planning process. It poses the necessary questions in logical order and moves people through the planning process step by step. The chart begins by having the user identify short-term and long-term goals or objectives of the campaign, and if there are any intermediate goals that can be accomplished in between the short and long-term goals. The second column of the chart is where advocates can list organizational considerations, such as membership, if let's say one of the goals within the campaign is to start a tobacco youth coalition. The third column is where advocates can make a list of potential allies and opponents to their cause and identifying potential community or governmental leaders that would be interested in supporting the campaign. The fourth column will highlight targets, which is always a person. This could be focused on a community group you would like to partner with or gain support from. The last column is where campaign tactics are organized to help bring all the pieces together. More so, this column is where advocates can list ways in which they make their campaign power felt with the targets they have identified. Tactics include media events, direct asks for action regarding to the specific campaign, like supporting a policy restricting the sales of flavored tobacco or limiting youth accessibility to e-cigarettes. Again, the best way to look at this chart is as if it were a living document that can be added to over the course of the campaign. This brings us to the end of our presentation and into the Q&A portion. Before we begin, we would like to point out that you can learn more about California's Clean Air Project by visiting our website or by visiting any one of our social media platforms. Below, you can also find our contact information. Here you have Manveer's direct email as well as mine. Thank you so much for your time, and we are here to answer your questions.